I need to tell this before it happens again. My name doesn't matter anymore, but I used to be an actress. 3 years ago, I was cast in a play that shouldn't exist, and the theater that hosted it shouldn't exist either. It was called the Marrow House. From the outside, it looked abandoned, as though time itself had forgotten it. Broken windows reflected the pale moonlight. Rusted letters hung crooked above the doorway. But inside it was beautiful. Red velvet seats, golden balconies, dust that never settled. The air smelled of old wood, candle wax, and secrets. Every corner seemed to hum with memory. Every shadow seemed alive. The first time I stepped on that stage, I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel excitement. I felt recognition, as if I had been there before, only I didn't know when. We were performing a play called The Last Guest. I was cast as the lead. The role felt too natural. The lines came easily, almost before I could think of them. Too easily. Rehearsal started normally at first. The other actors were nervous, tripping over lines. I wasn't. It was as though the play lived inside me. Then I noticed it. Whenever I forgot a line, something whispered it from the dark. Soft, patient, familiar. At first I assumed it was the director, but he was always beside me, confused, unaware of what was speaking. There was one seat I could not stop staring at. A13, front row. Always empty, yet I could feel eyes on me, watching, waiting. As days passed, the whispers grew clearer. Sometimes they spoke words I hadn't even memorized yet. Sometimes they laughed softly, echoing in the empty theater. I began to notice things in the shadows, pale figures, just beyond the edges of vision. Sometimes just a hand on a railing, a head tilting, a smile too wide. A week before opening, I found it, backstage, hidden behind a stack of old props, a framed poster, a play I knew, The Last Guest. The same theater, the same title, and the lead actress looked exactly like me. Not similar, exactly me. Same face, same expression, same name printed below hers. I told myself it was a coincidence, a prank, a trick of the lighting. But that night, I dreamed of the theater. I was on stage. The audience was there, but not alive. Pale faces, frozen smiles, stretching too wide, eyes that didn't blink. I tried to run, tried to leave, but the crowd didn't let me, and I begged them, don't let me disappear. Opening night arrived. The theater smelled of expectation, of old wood, of performance. The audience was alive, clapping, cheering, glowing with warmth. But when the lights dimmed for the final act, I saw them, behind the living audience, layer upon layer of pale figures, watching, waiting. And A13 wasn't empty anymore. I was sitting there, older, tired, smiling, watching myself on stage. My hands began shaking, but I kept performing. The final line approached. I refuse to be your ghost. As I said it, the living audience disappeared. The theater grew cold, and the girl in A13 rose. She walked toward me, patient, exhausted from years of waiting. You already said that once, she whispered. Cold hands grabbed my arms, from behind the curtain, from beneath the stage. The floor softened. I realized then, I wasn't falling. I was stepping into memory. When I opened my eyes, I was in A13, watching. On stage was another girl, terrified, trembling, delivering my lines, my movements, my voice, perfectly. The applause rose, the blackout came, and she vanished, just like I had. The theater doesn't take newcomers, it replays us, every 20 years, until the performance is perfect, until every terror, every fear, every line, every whisper is complete. I remained in A13. I tried to guide the next girl, whisper lines, protect her, warn her. But the theater has rules. Once rehearsal begins, you cannot leave. Once the show starts, you cannot stop performing. You cannot resist the spotlight. I thought maybe I could trick it. On the next opening night, I stepped onto the empty stage before anyone arrived. I will not perform for you, I shouted. The lights flickered, shadows twisted. The dead audience appeared, layer upon layer. And in A13, my younger self watched, perfect, patient, waiting. The theater screamed, not with sound, but through the wood, the air, the walls themselves. And I realized, you cannot cheat it. You cannot escape. You cannot fight. All you can do is survive long enough to warn the next one. I discovered the origin, the first script, yellowed, fragile, handwritten, the perfect performance. Written by Clara Marrow, founder of the theater. She wanted perfection, absolute realism, complete terror. Nothing worked until she discovered the theater itself could remember. Walls pulsed with memory, air carried emotion, wood absorbed the actor's fear. The theater became a trap. Complete performances stored the actors' souls. The audience of shadows, the trapped performers. Seat A13, the anchor for the next lead. Clara wanted immortality. She achieved it. And now I am trapped performing again and again. Not once, not twice, but over decades. I whisper now, every night, to every new girl. The theater wants your soul. It wants the performance. It always gets what it wants. Don't fight, don't hope. Just survive long enough to whisper to the next one. The lights dim, the audience fills in. I am always here, waiting, watching. And when she arrives, the next girl, I will whisper softly, patiently. You are not alone, but you will perform.
I have been here for months now. Years, perhaps. Time bends inside the Marrow House. Days, nights, they blend. The theater doesn't care. It only wants the performance. Then she arrived. The new girl. Pale, trembling, clutching the script as if it were a life preserver. She looked exactly like me, not in some loose resemblance, but as though I had been split in two and sent back 20 years. She didn't see me. She couldn't. The theater makes sure of that. But I saw her. Every hesitation, every glance at the empty A13, every whispered prayer she muttered under her breath. She stepped onto the stage for her first rehearsal. Her voice cracked, her hands shook. And I remembered that terror, the hollow fear in your chest when you realize you are no longer acting, but living the script. I whispered from the shadows, soft enough that she would think it was her own memory. Line. Don't forget the line. She looked around, confused. Shivers ran down her spine. But she obeyed, and I watched. As rehearsals went on, I began to notice the audience forming behind the living crowd. Pale faces, endless layers, all watching. Some of them were me. All of me. Past performances, trapped forever, repeating. Some smiled, some frowned, some leaned forward as if trying to warn her. And always, A13, always the anchor, always me, sitting there, waiting, whispering, patient, silent, except for the words that guided her through the terror she did not yet understand. I began to realize something else. The theater was changing her. Subtle shifts. Her movements became more like mine. Her gestures echoed my own. Her fear became familiar. And yet she fought it. She didn't know she was fighting the theater itself. One evening, she paused mid-line. The shadows twisted. The air grew thick. I leaned closer from my seat in A13, whispering urgently, "Do not stop. Do not resist. The theater will not forgive hesitation." Her eyes widened. She stumbled, then repeated the line as though reading my thoughts. She didn't know, but I had guided her through the first trap. I had survived long enough to teach her how fragile the line between reality and performance could be. Yet she still did not know the full truth. The theater feeds on hope. I have learned that over centuries. Every new girl who enters brings fear, but also hope. And hope is a weakness. The theater notices it. It twists it, shapes it, and eventually, it will consume her, just as it consumed me. I wanted her to survive longer than I did. I wanted her to understand the rules faster, to obey, to endure. But I also wondered, could there be a crack in this cycle? I began experimenting. Small things. I moved objects on the stage before she entered. I whispered lines slightly differently, testing if the theater would notice. It always noticed. The theater is patient, but it notices. And then something shifted. A shadow detached itself from the walls. Not the usual pale audience, not A13. Something darker, watching me, watching her. Not yet hostile, but curious. Clara Marrow herself, or what remained of her. I could feel her presence pulsing through the theater, correcting, observing, waiting for perfection to slip. I realized then, the theater isn't just a prison. It's a classroom. Every new girl is a student, every whispered word a lesson. And I am now a teacher. But the question lingers. Am I helping her survive, or simply prolonging her performance for Clara's perfection?
I understood then. Clara Marrow is not bound by rules. She is the theater. Every flicker of light, every pulse of wood, every whisper belongs to her, and she is patient, infinite, eternal. The new girl froze again mid-step, as if the air itself had become a wall. The shadows deepened around her, stretching unnaturally across the stage, curling like fingers ready to seize. I wanted to warn her, to pull her back, but I could not. The theater would punish interference, and Clara was testing both of us. A soft, almost melodic voice wound through the air, not quite sound, but thought, a pressure in my skull, bending perception. Guide her, or fail yourself. It wasn't just instruction, it was manipulation, a trap hidden in the way the theater breathed, in the way the floorboards hummed under our weight, in the way the walls leaned inward. Every action we took fed her, shaped her vision of perfection. The new girl stumbled over a line. The shadows hissed. I leaned forward in A13 and whispered the words she had forgotten, but my voice sounded wrong to her. A tug in the air pulled at her mind, and I realized Clara was twisting me, bending even my guidance. She wanted not just the girl's perfection, but mine as well. Every whisper I offered, every moment I tried to protect, she warped into part of the lesson, part of her design. And then the theater shifted. The stage itself seemed to breathe. The lights pulsed like a heartbeat. The red velvet curtains fluttered, though no air moved. And I saw her, Clara, full this time, or as full as a presence bound to memory and ambition can be. Taller than the shadows, impossibly thin, her face pale as bone, eyes black as a void. She watched us with a calm patience that chilled the marrow in my bones. Every hesitation, every fear, is mine to mold, I heard, not with my ears, but inside my head. Every line, every gesture, every tremble is my perfection. The new girl froze completely. Her script slipped from her hands, pages fluttering to the stage floor. The pale audience leaned forward. Every trapped performer I had seen before was there, their faces eerily still, waiting. And I realized they were not just watching her, they were watching me. Every choice I made, every whispered word, every attempt to help was part of Clara's lesson. She wanted us to act perfectly, to obey, to believe we had choice, but we never did. I tried to call to the new girl. My voice, my whispers, my attempts at guidance, they were muffled by the pressure of Clara's presence. The air itself seemed to reject sound, bending the very words into obedience to her will. She is everywhere. She is inside everything. She is the theater, and the theater is her. The floorboards vibrated beneath my feet. I felt them, shivering, alive, like veins of some vast, pulsing organism. The walls leaned closer. The ceiling darkened, shadows pooling like ink. And through it all, Clara's gaze followed every move, shaping us, bending the performance towards some perfection I could barely understand. I realized then the cruelest truth. This is no longer a cycle of repetition alone. Clara is teaching now. She is shaping not just the performers, but the teacher, me. Every word I whisper, every attempt I make to protect the new girl becomes a thread in her tapestry. The new girl took a step forward, trembling, her hands shaking so violently that it was a wonder she could hold the script. And Clara's influence tightened, like a hand around her mind, shaping every thought, every fear, every hesitation. I whispered again, desperately, guiding her as best I could. But even my whispers were no longer entirely mine. They were filtered, bent by Clara. She wanted her perfection,
and the theater, alive and hungry, enforced her will with every heartbeat of the floor, every sigh of the walls, every flicker of the lights. The new girl spoke a line correctly for the first time. The lights flickered. A low hum pulsed through the theater, vibrating through bone and blood, and I saw her fully now, Clara, at the top balcony, smiling faintly, arms crossed, her eyes gleaming with terrible satisfaction. She had marked the moment. The girl had followed the first step into her web, and I understood completely. There is no escape. There is only guidance under the shadow of perfection, only obedience under the gaze of Clara Marrow, only survival long enough to pass the lesson to the next. I leaned back in A13, whispering softly, "Do not look at her too long. Do not fight. The theater is not your friend. But survive. Survive and guide her." Clara's presence pulsed around us, alive in every heartbeat of the theater, and I knew with absolute certainty, nothing, not my voice, not the new girl's courage, not even the passing of centuries, could outwit her. She is patient. She is infinite. She is the theater itself, and she is waiting.
I could feel Clara's eyes on me. The air hummed with her presence, the theater alive with memory and intention. Every shadow, every heartbeat of the floor, every flicker of the lights, she was aware of me, of the new girl, of every choice I made. But I could not simply sit in A13 forever. I had to try. I had to do something to influence this cycle, to protect her, or at least to survive in a way that mattered. I began to observe the theater differently. Not just the stage, not just the shadows, but the patterns. The way Clara shaped the light. The way the floorboards trembled beneath hesitation. The way the air thickened when fear crept into the new girl's chest. If the theater responded to fear, to obedience, to performance, maybe it could respond to something else. I whispered to the new girl differently now, not the usual prompts, not the lines she had forgotten. I spoke words that sounded familiar, but twisted in meaning, subtle enough to plant a seed. Do not fear them. Do not obey what you do not understand. Remember, you are still here. She looked at me, eyes wide, confused, and I realized I had caught Clara's attention. The theater pulsed almost violently, as though warning me, but I did not stop. I was going to try to manipulate the manipulator. The lights flickered violently this time. Shadows stretched unnaturally, writhing toward me, toward the new girl. The floorboards shivered. The air thickened until every breath felt like it was being drawn through wet cloth. And then I saw her, Clara, at the top balcony, full and horrifying. Her eyes bored into me, her smile thin, calculated. Every movement, every slight gesture of her hands commanded the theater itself. "You dare to interfere?" I heard, not through sound but thought, as if the theater had become her mouth. "Do you think you can change perfection?" The new girl trembled, sensing the tension. The air around her thickened. The shadows pressed closer, and the pale audience leaned forward, waiting for a misstep. I swallowed my fear. My plan was dangerous. The theater would punish any deviation from its rules. And yet, I whispered again, louder, clearer this time. "You are not alone. The theater cannot take your soul unless you let it. It responds to understanding, not fear, not obedience, but understanding." The floor trembled. The lights pulsed. The shadows reached toward me, but they moved more slowly this time, hesitant, as if sensing the subtle shift. Clara's gaze sharpened, piercing through the layers of time, but she did not move to stop me, yet. The new girl froze mid-line. For the first time, she looked directly at A13, directly at me, and for a heartbeat, she hesitated, not out of fear, but out of comprehension. She sensed the theater was alive, yes, but she also sensed me, the voice guiding her. I whispered the lines in a way I had never dared before, not as prompts, not as instructions, but as reflections, echoes of her own thoughts, her own fear, her own understanding. You control the line, you control the stage. It cannot act without you. For a moment, the shadows hesitated. The pale audience leaned back, unsure. Clara's presence pulsed around us, but now there was a ripple, an uncertainty. She had not anticipated this. The theater groaned, the walls warped,
The red curtains flapped like wings, and then her voice, Clara's, unmistakable, cut through the air, through my mind. Foolish girl, do you think you can bend perfection? Do you think you can shape me? The new girl's knees buckled. The floorboards trembled violently. The lights flashed, shadows twisting violently around her. And yet, she stood. I am not yours, I whispered, my voice carrying more authority than I had ever dared. You cannot take what is already alive. You cannot shape what understands. The theater screamed, not in sound, but in vibration, in pressure, in the way the air pressed against our lungs. But something had changed. For the first time in decades, Clara hesitated. Her influence was immense, absolute, but she was not infinite. The new girl's voice rang out, unshaken. The shadows recoiled slightly. The pale audience leaned back, unsure. I saw it, the first crack in the cycle. Clara's eyes narrowed. The theater pulsed around us, unstable, reacting to understanding, not obedience. I whispered again, guiding her, strengthening the seed of comprehension. The theater remembers, it watches, but you are more than its memory. You are the choice it cannot consume. For a brief, shining moment, the new girl smiled, an act of courage, of defiance, of understanding. The stage itself seemed to hold its breath. And then I knew, the cycle is not unbreakable, not entirely. The theater responds to fear, to obedience, but also to comprehension. And if the seed of understanding grows, perhaps, just perhaps, the next performance can be something different. Clara's presence tightened, warning, enraged, but she did not strike yet. She was patient, infinite, eternal, waiting, watching. But now, for the first time, I was not entirely powerless.
The theater quivered beneath our feet. Shadows stretched across the stage like tendrils, curling around the new girl, around me, around everything. The red curtains fluttered as if breathing. The pale audience leaned forward, expectant. And above it all, at the top balcony, Clara Marrow's silhouette remained, a towering, impossibly thin figure, eyes glowing black, watching, calculating. The moment had arrived. The theater pulsed, alive with anticipation. It was no longer just observation. It demanded a response. The cycle's rules were absolute, but Clara had shown me something new. There could be a choice. I whispered to the new girl, my voice trembling but firm. Listen, there are 3 paths: submission, escape, or permanent entrapment. Choose carefully, but you must understand, whatever you do, the theater will respond. Her eyes widened. She looked around, sensing the weight of the stage, the pressure of the air, the gaze of every trapped performer. She was terrified, but I could see comprehension blooming. Submission? She whispered. Obedience. Give yourself fully to the theater, to Clara. You will survive, but not freely. You will become part of the cycle, trapped in its memory forever. You will perform endlessly, whisper endlessly, as I do. Her face paled at the thought. I could feel Clara's gaze pressing harder, shaping the shadows, urging her toward it. Escape? She asked, voice barely audible. Escape is nearly impossible, I admitted. The theater is alive, it remembers, it punishes hesitation. But if you understand it, if you use comprehension instead of fear, you might bend its rules. Step lightly, think like it thinks, move like it remembers. There is a chance, a small one. Her lips trembled. She took a step backward, then forward. I could feel the theater quivering, uncertain. Clara's presence flared, stronger now, like a storm building. And permanent entrapment? She whispered, almost a question to herself. Refuse to move, refuse to speak, refuse to act. The theater will not forgive. You will be crushed by time and memory. You will exist but never live, a shadow among shadows, nothing more. The room fell silent. Only the pulse of the theater echoed in our chests. Every breath, every heartbeat, a drumbeat in Clara's hands. The new girl clenched her fists, gripping the script so tightly the pages crumpled. The shadows surged. Clara's silhouette leaned forward, a whisper cutting into my mind. Do you think you can defy me? Do you think they can defy me?
The theater itself responded. The stage stretched, the walls curved inward, red velvet seats rippled as though breathing. The pale audience leaned forward, closer than ever. Time itself slowed. I realized then comprehension was our only weapon. Fear was her ally. Obedience was her throne. "Do not fear," I whispered to the new girl, my voice barely cutting through the pressure. "Use understanding, bend the memory, move as the theater expects, but remember who you are." She nodded, eyes wide but resolute. For the first time, she did not tremble at Clara's gaze. For the first time, she acted consciously, deliberately. She recited her lines, but not as they were written. She inserted tiny variations, subtle breaths, pauses where the theater expected none. The shadows recoiled, the pale audience shivered, and the air grew electric. Clara's form wavered, her presence tightening, then stretching. The theater screamed, not in sound, but in pulse, vibration, and memory, but she had not broken us. The new girl stepped forward into the spotlight. She held her voice steady, her hands calm, yet every movement reflected comprehension, not fear. The walls pulsed around her, testing her, bending reality, pulling at the edges of her mind. Clara's silhouette flared at the top balcony. I felt her anger, her frustration, her calculation. She had not been defied in centuries, and yet the new girl moved with purpose, not panic. I whispered again, guiding her. "The theater remembers, it shapes, it punishes, but it does not yet own you. You must act like its memory, and yet remain yourself." For a heartbeat, the world seemed to pause. The shadows flattened, the air held still. And then she did it. A line she had never read, spoken perfectly, with slight defiance, perfectly timed. The pale audience flinched, the shadows hesitated, the theater wavered. Clara's form flared, her presence tightening, then stretching. The theater screamed, not in sound, but in pulse, vibration, and memory, but she had not broken us. The new girl stepped forward into the spotlight. She held her voice steady, her hands calm, yet every movement reflected comprehension, not fear. The walls pulsed around her, testing her, bending reality, pulling at the edges of her mind. Clara's form flared, her presence tightening, then stretching. The theater screamed, not in sound, but in pulse, vibration, and memory, but she had not broken us. The new girl stepped forward into the spotlight. She held her voice steady, her hands calm, yet every movement reflected comprehension, not fear. The walls pulsed around her, testing her, bending reality, pulling at the edges of her mind. Clara's form flared, her presence tightening, then stretching. The theater screamed, not in sound, but in pulse, vibration, and memory, but she had not broken us. The new girl stepped forward into the spotlight. She held her voice steady, her hands calm, yet every movement reflected comprehension, not fear. The walls pulsed around her, testing her, bending reality, pulling at the edges of her mind. Clara's form flared, her presence tightening, then stretching. The theater screamed, not in sound, but in pulse, vibration, and memory, but she had not broken us. The new girl stepped forward into the spotlight. She held her voice steady, her hands calm, yet every movement reflected comprehension, not fear. The walls pulsed around her, testing her, bending reality, pulling at the edges of her mind. Clara's form flared, her presence tightening, then stretching. The theater screamed, not in sound, but in pulse, vibration, and memory, but she had not broken us. The new girl stepped forward into the spotlight. She held her voice steady, her hands calm, yet every movement reflected comprehension, not fear. The walls pulsed around her, testing her, bending reality, pulling at the edges of her mind. Clara's form flared, her presence tightening, then stretching. The theater screamed, not in sound, but in pulse, vibration, and memory, but she had not broken us. The new girl stepped forward into the spotlight. She held her voice steady, her hands calm, yet every movement reflected comprehension, not fear. The walls pulsed around her, testing her, bending reality, pulling at the edges of her mind. Clara's form flared, her presence tightening, then stretching. The theater screamed, not in sound, but in pulse, vibration, and memory, but she had not broken us. The new girl stepped forward into the spotlight. She held her voice steady, her hands calm, yet every movement reflected comprehension, not fear. The walls pulsed around her, testing her, bending reality, pulling at the edges of her mind. Clara's form flared, her presence tightening, then stretching. The theater screamed, not in sound, but in pulse, vibration, and memory, but she had not broken us. The new girl stepped forward into the spotlight. She held her voice steady, her hands calm, yet every movement reflected comprehension, not fear. The walls pulsed around her, testing her, bending reality, pulling at the edges of her mind. Clara's form flared, her presence tightening, then stretching. The theater screamed, not in sound, but in pulse, vibration, and memory, but she had not broken us. The new girl stepped forward into the spotlight. She held her voice steady, her hands calm, yet every movement reflected comprehension, not fear. The walls pulsed around her, testing her, bending reality, pulling at the edges of her mind. Clara's form flared, her presence tightening, then stretching. The theater screamed, not in sound, but in pulse, vibration, and memory, but she had not broken us. The new girl stepped forward into the spotlight. She held her voice steady, her hands calm, yet every movement reflected comprehension, not fear. The walls pulsed around her, testing her, bending reality, pulling at the edges of her mind. Clara's form flared, her presence tightening, then stretching. The theater screamed, not in sound, but in pulse, vibration, and memory, but she had not broken us. The new girl stepped forward into the spotlight. She held her voice steady, her hands calm, yet every movement reflected comprehension, not fear. The walls pulsed around her, testing